I have a weird belief. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad circumstance. If you can kind of flip it in your head, you can find a way to make what seems like a bad situation a positive situation. So I'd wake up and work at like Walmart until 3 or 4 p.m., then go to a gas station or a movie theater or whatever job I had at the time. So your whole day is kind of spent just working. So you're trying to Kaizen every day of your life. And Kaizen just means try to make 1% improvements every day.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, this is Now Tell Us, and we are glad to see you to come and tell us. Where are you based?
Currently in Northern Virginia,
Okay,
in Ashburn.
that's good, and it's good that. And how is the weather today?
It's pretty good. It's actually, for once, it's nice. For the past couple weeks, it's been on and off of like rainy, gloomy, cloudy, a little bit of hail. It's been all over the place. So it's nice to experience some sunlight and relatively warm weather for once in the past 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that's good to know that. Now, I speak some Greek, although not so good, and I like learning every day. I'm not from Greece, but I'm in Greece right now. I come from Kenya, for your information.
Okay.
So I found myself in Greek and I'm learning words, and I'm always curious when I see a word in English, because I know that we have a lot of words that are in English that have Greek origin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I came across this word and I said, oh, I haven't come across this word before. What could this word be?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique word.
Yeah.
It's funny enough, I was on another podcast about 2 years ago, and the gentleman interviewing me was Greek.
Uh-huh.
And even he saw the word and he's like, oh, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what that means. So I feel like even for people that speak Greek, I don't know if it's that well known of a word. So
And we are ready to find out what's in it. What's in it? What's EU? Okay, pronounce it for us. You've been practicing it.
yeah, I've had a lot of practice with it. It's eudaimonia.
Okay.
Yeah, basically it just means it's sort of from classic Greek philosophy.
Mm.
And the idea behind it, loosely translated, it's the flourishing life or the good life. But I think nowadays, anything modern, people kind of translate it as the fulfilled life or fulfillment. So that's usually the thing I try to nowadays talk to people more about is eudaimonia.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of see it as a framework for people to kind of effectively check every box in their life.
Mm.
If that all makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And how did you come to work on this hard word and be excited, be passionate about? How did that happen?
Yeah. So not to make a story too long, but I kind of came across that word. It's back in college. For anyone watching, I got kicked out of college twice. Not for anything super crazy, no drugs, no excessive partying, nothing criminal related. It was just financial. Couldn't afford the tuition. So they told me I had to go. And so around that time, I was kind of working just in gas stations, at a bar, Walmart, random job just to kind of make money. I tried to figure out how to make money, and I was kind of going through depression at the time. So I wanted to figure out how to improve my life, make some money. And I would go to the library all the time and sort of just study fitness books and books on how to make money. And eventually it led me to studying Greek philosophy. I kind of went down the rabbit hole of regular philosophy, then a little bit of Chinese philosophy, then the Greek philosophy. And then that led me to Socrates. And then Socrates and Aristotle kind of had this concept called eudaimonia. Long story short. So that's kind of how I got to learning about that word that no one knows about.
Oh, so did you fall in love with it because of the sound of it, or did you because of the principles that are in it?
A little bit of both, but yeah, mainly the principles, especially at that time. I think it sort of I don't know. It sort of made things make more sense, especially considering like where I was in my life at that time.
Mm,
Because at that time I didn't have a lot of money, so I was sort of just eating like junk food, a lot of McDonald's, a lot of Taco Bell. That's all that you could afford on a college campus if you're not a student.
mm,
Um, didn't have a lot of money. Was kind of scraping by whatever I could to try to like barely pay rent, and didn't even really have a good social life. Even though it was a college campus, most people are in class, and I'm spending my entire day at work because I'd wake up and work at like Walmart until 3 or 4 p.m., then go to a gas station or a movie theater or whatever job I had at the time. So your whole day is kind of spent just working. So you don't really have any of the major boxes that eudaimonia goes over. You don't have any of those checked off. So at that time, that's kind of what made it really stick with me. It's sort of
okay.
just an answer to all the questions I had.
Oh, and what are those boxes? Let's hear those boxes that you keep mentioning. We see if we can tick some of them.
Yeah, yes. So eudaimonia, basically what Socrates and Aristotle sort of taught, or their overall theory, was that in order for a human to be fulfilled in life or to have that sense of flourishing, they needed to have three major boxes checked off. And the three boxes are: you need to have your health, and that's physical health and mental health. You need to have wealth, and you don't have to be rich. That's not really. I don't think that's really what they were going for. But you need to be at least well off. You have to be
Mm-hmm.
living below your means, essentially. And then the last one is relationships. And then relationships, I think people hear it and they think more of like man to woman or whatever their sexual orientation might be. But it's a combination of that and just general um, social circle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have value to other people that you come in contact with? Do you have a good network of people around you? So the three of those things is kind of what makes up eudaimonia.
And what? How do you apply them? How do you get them active? I mean, you have healthy relationships. You have good health. The principles. Do they teach also the steps to approach that and be successful in those areas?
Yeah. So from what they teach, they sort of, at least from what I've seen, it's more of a framework and a theory.
Mm,
So I kind of took that and I tried to take my personal experience and figure out sort of more of almost like a system to kind of get people to check all three of those boxes. Because
mm,
I usually feel like me personally, I usually feel like most people have at least one checked off. Rarely do I see people have two, and almost never do I see anyone have all three. And I think even if you can get one, that's good. Two is fantastic. Three, of course, is the ideal. But for example, you might see someone who has a lot of money, but they're not in great shape. And maybe their
mm,
relationships aren't even that good because it's all transactional. It's not really like a true relationship, so to speak. Where you might see someone who's in great shape, but they spend so much of their time working out that they neglect maybe trying to learn more about other areas of life. And
mm,
maybe they also don't have money, or maybe they're spending so much time at the gym or working out or whatever that they neglect friendships or deep, meaningful relationships.
mm.
So, yeah, I feel like you usually see one, maybe two, but rarely all three. Um, so that's sort of just been what I've been trying to help people with, is helping them find a way to get all three in the simplest and most efficient way possible. Because it's difficult. It's hard to get all three.
And how do you accomplish that?
So my personal idea is that everyone should start with health, because I think it's the easiest to kind of fulfill. It's the easiest to get done.
Mm,
Um, the other two, in my opinion, like relationships, require other people to kind of almost consent to being friends with you or to being in that relationship with you, and you can't control the people's beliefs or opinions, so it's a bit
mm,
harder. um, Money is a bit of the same thing. If you're in a job that you don't like, it might take a bit of time. You might have to learn a new skill to get a better job or to get a new career. But health you can do anywhere.
mm,
Even if you don't have a gym membership, if you want to start in your physical health, a few push-ups a day, air squats. If you live near a playground, some pull-ups, that is pretty easy to accomplish. Same with mental health. Meditation is always an option. You don't need anything external to meditate. Books are abundant. Library cards are free. Usually, I've yet to find a library that isn't free. There might be one out there,
Right.
but yeah, those two things are the easiest to kind of accomplish. And then I would say the second thing is usually, and it depends on where you're at in life. I would say the second thing is money, because I think money will help you make all three areas easier to fulfill. Like if you have no money, but you have a decent social circle, I think most people will find it hard to keep that social circle because they're probably going to try to improve their lives. And if they want to do certain things that might require money, and if you don't have any money, it's eventually those friendships aren't going to last very long. Those relationships won't last too long. And same with health. If you don't have enough money, you'll kind of be like me several years ago in college, where you have to rely on junk food and a lot of processed stuff that's just not good for you. So that'll degrade your physical and mental health. So second thing I would say is money. Try to focus on increasing your income or at least spending less to live below your means. And then the third thing would be relationships. And I think that's the most valuable. I think relationships are the most valuable in the long term. But I think good relationships are hard to achieve. If that all makes sense.
It does. And what tools do you use, or what approach do you follow to help the person who is interested in improving on those areas?
Yeah, so usually I try to figure out where they are, because some people might not need much help with health, for example.
Okay.
Some people might be in good shape. They might, for whatever reason, mental and physical health might be where it needs to be. But the money could be a difficult part. So I try to apply. I used to be, I'm technically I still am, but in the past, primarily I was a real estate advisor. So I try to take what I've learned from being a real estate advisor and just kind of studying finance on my own and apply it to wherever they are. Some people, they might say, oh, I'm making, let's say 40K. I'm fine with 40K, but my credit's bad and I feel a bit stressed out about this, or I want to buy a house eventually. And then depending on where they are and where they want to be, it might be a situation where it's okay, you could just move to a different state with a spending's not a good word. You can move to a different state where your money will go further, or a different area. Or some people, me personally, I'm a big advocate in moving to different countries. I think other countries have plenty of great incentives, especially for American citizens. Not to get too deep in the weeds. But yeah, depending on where you're at, I try to work with people and figure out, what's the best objective and what's the best strategy. And then
so you work with them as a personal coach in this case, advisor.
Yeah.
What do you call yourself when you're working with the people?
Yeah, essentially, just I feel like coach is always used, which I have nothing against. I always try to be different. Like even like real estate advisor is effectively just a real estate agent. I just don't like to call myself an agent because it's just used a lot. But yeah, coach would essentially be what it is, just kind of coaching people.
That's good. So to those out there who are watching us, thank you for being with us. And we are learning Greek today, and we are learning what the philosophers did those early years. So today I have a new name, a new word rather, and I hope that you got this word too. So Lenny, what is one of, no, you talked about those times that you've been through life, and things you didn't like, you did, and things that maybe you like to do, you did not do, like continuing with college, and you had the finances. But have you come to a point where you've actually said, oh, I did that, right? I felt at the top of the world. Has that time been with you?
Yeah. Do you mean like in hindsight,
yeah.
yeah, it's weird. I feel like sometimes when you're living a certain situation, it seems bad. And then in the future, maybe like 4 or 5 or 6 years down the line, you kind of sit there and you look at a scenario and you think to yourself, that was the best possible thing that could have happened. It's kind of that hindsight bias. in hindsight, everything looks like it's clear and like it was going to work out. But yeah, I mean, in a weird way, like when I tell the story, it sounds bad. I got kicked out. I had depression, had terrible diet. But in hindsight, that was the best thing that ever
Mm.
happened.
Mm.
To be honest, I often think about what my life would be had I not been kicked out and had everything kind of just gone the way it was supposed to or as smoothly as possible. And I don't think it would have been bad, but I think there's a lot I wouldn't have learned. And I think there's a lot of experiences that I only would have had I gone through the bad stuff, if that all makes sense.
Mm. Yeah,
So
there are things that we go through in life that are there to teach us lessons. And someone said that things that happen don't happen to me; they happen for me. So you just change
absolutely.
the perspective of how you look at things and start appreciating the good in every bad situation, and keep on taking advantage of every opportunity that you get.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry. I was gonna say I always think that I have a weird belief. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad circumstance, like an
mhm.
objectively. I mean, I think there's some things people can probably debate are objectively bad. Fair enough, but I think in general, most things we experience are kind of subjectively bad. And if you can kind of flip it in your head, you can find a way to make what seems like a bad situation a positive situation. So that's sort of a weird philosophy I have. People fight me on it, but I think I don't know. I tend to see some people in really bad situations. At least on the surface, it looks bad, and they take that bad situation and they flip it, and it becomes the best possible situation for them or a huge opportunity.
Use that to define something like a failure in business. There's a deal you are going to close and you lose it. How do you translate all those the failures in life?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on the individual. I
Mm,
think like I'll give an example. So there was one guy, I forget his name. He invented I think hot Cheetos. And if I recall the story correctly, he was a janitor. I think at Doritos. I think he was working at Doritos and he was like a janitor. And it was a really terrible situation for him. I think for
mm,
most people, if you thought to yourself, you have to be a janitor at maybe the age of 40 something or 30 or 50 something, most people would not want that life. Or at least that's not what they probably would have dreamed for. And somehow he came up with a really good idea to make, I think he was Mexican and he decided to he came up with an idea to make the Cheetos or the Doritos spicy because it hadn't been done before.
mm,
And because he was the janitor, I think he had time to meet with the CEO when no one else could because the CEO had, it's exclusive. And he pitched the idea. And long story short, it led to him going from a janitor to being, I think he's like a multi-millionaire or he might even be a billionaire. I'm not too sure, but he's rich is the point. He's very, very rich.
mhm,
So things like that, or sometimes I'll hear about people they may have thought a deal would have been good, and they get into a deal, and then down the line, that company that they got into a deal with was a scam or just not a good company to work for.
mm,
And then the people that actually got the deal basically sunk with the
mm,
company.
mhm,
Like I think was it Enron? I think Enron had a similar situation. I think it was like the electric company. Everyone kind of thought that they were geniuses and they all wanted to work with them. Then they found out that they were sort of manipulating the numbers incorrectly, and the people that did kind of partner with them went under, and a lot of the people that missed out were kind of like, "Hey, I actually dodged a bullet," because they were lying, or things weren't really what they seemed.
yeah.
So I don't know. I think it depends. I think you have to kind of actively try to frame life positively as best you can. And I think it's that idea of framing the world positively. I think is I don't want to say underappreciated. I guess underutilized is a better way to put it.
Mm,
Um, Even like one thing it's a bit dark, but I think it's a great story. It's a great story for me at least. I read. Have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning?
I should read it. It keeps coming up.
It's a good book. It's about, I think his name is Viktor Frankl,
Mm,
He was a survivor in Auschwitz and like Nazi Germany.
yeah.
And even he at that time sort of had a weird frame where he tried to view his situation. I don't want to be too dark, so I think anyone who's understanding that time period can understand if he's Jewish, what may have been happening. But even he tried to reframe that situation as positive. And in doing so, I think for him, he was saying like that's the best kind of experience he could have had in the long term. It kind of gave his life more meaning and
Mm.
helped him stay alive. But yeah, of course, no one would want to be in that situation, but sometimes you can't choose a circumstance. So the way you frame a circumstance will define it as good or bad. Hopefully that all made sense to people listening.
Yes. Now, on a personal level, as you have been practicing eudaimonia, how did the COVID period pass you? I mean, how did you go through the COVID period?
Yeah, so it was initially scary. I'll be honest. It was scary at first because I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I do think that kind of as COVID went on, again, it's a framing thing I try to do. I saw it more as a weird blessing, at least for me on a personal level, than as a negative. I'll say one thing that was fantastic about it. It gave me a lot of time to just be alone and work.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, like at the time, I was just living by myself, and I had an apartment, and I was just living by myself. So I would just sit inside, and I had gym equipment in my apartment, so I would just work all day. So it definitely made me a lot more productive. You don't really get as much of the FOMO, of that fear of missing out, when no one can go out at all. So in that sense, it made things a bit easier. It made things a lot more productive and simpler.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a bit scary. I, yeah, overall, I can't say it negatively impacted me too much.
Mm.
But of course, I know some people that it affected terribly. So
Yeah.
maybe
You
I'm
have
just more fortunate in that situation.
you have many, but then I'm always coming across people who say, "Oh yeah, that time is when I did this or that. That's when I started such a project. That's when I stopped from such a habit. Someone was going through a bad habit, and then that provided the opportunity to stop it. And so it's not always all negative. The things that you go through, you can always pick that one specific thing that is beneficial to you, something that, I mean, learn the lessons and keep on moving.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I know. During the COVID thing, this is me trying to reframe stuff. I know. A lot of people I knew and people I've heard of had an interesting situation where they were kind of with a spouse, and they ended up kind of getting sick of their spouse because they were cooped together for so long.
Yeah,
And
many incidences, many of them.
yeah, yeah. And a part of me
Yeah,
kind of thought to myself, there's two ways to look at this. There's the negative way where it's, oh man, me and my wife or my husband or whatever, we're going through a bad situation because we're just so close together all the time.
mm,
But the way I kind of saw it, I guess the more optimistic viewpoint was this gave you the opportunity for anyone that was in that situation. It kind of gave them the opportunity to realize that maybe whoever they had as a spouse might not have been the best partner. And
mm,
instead of that gradual 5, 10, 15, 20-year decrease of the relationship, COVID kind of forced it to all, it kind of forced it up front. So now it's like, oh man, I really don't get along with my spouse, or this situation isn't really that great. Oh, I've been distracting myself with work and my job or whatever, and COVID kind of forced me to confront the situation. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think even something like COVID, you can frame as good or bad, depending on how you want to take it.
so you are in pursuit of a good life, and this is eudaimonia, and then your environment is not so conducive. Like you have people who are negative. We have criminals there in the world, and I always hear incidences there in the US. And then you have friends who are not really friends, like you say, the spouse discovers, oh, this is was not the right person. So how do you deal with those outside forces? Because it's one thing for an occurrence to that is happening out there, but then when you come across a force that is against you, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah. It kind of just depends. It depends on what it is, I would say. Like, for example, if it's an individual that's negative,
Mm,
I try to think about whatever I can personally do. So for me, it would just be removing myself from that situation. If a person's too negative, I think the best thing is just find a way to distance yourself from them. Maybe you don't have to cut them off entirely, depending on if it's a relative or someone you've known for a very long period of
mm,
time. But I think the best scenario for that would be just to find a way to reduce contact with that person.
okay. Mm-hmm.
Same thing, even with like you mentioned criminals. I'm from West Philadelphia. For
Okay.
anyone watching, it's a not safe area in the U.S. It's a very dangerous area.
Mm,
And I've had friends and people in that area or people nearby who would say, I live in West Philly or I live in a very dangerous neighborhood. What do I do? I'm a huge advocate of figuring out what you can do as an individual and not trying to control the environment as much as control yourself. Um, and even for that, I would say the best situation might just be to move. I know it's not easy to do, and it's not like everyone can
mm,
just pack up and leave. But if you're in a dangerous situation where there's criminals or the environment itself is toxic or poisonous, me personally, I think the best thing you can do is find a way to move as quickly as possible. If that means getting a small apartment that's relatively inexpensive, finding people who are strangers or friends, hopefully friends that you know, and moving in with them in a different city, starting over brand new. I think that's probably the best case scenario. Um, I know personally, I'll say this: when I was towards the end of college, when I finally did get back into college, I really went through a period of trying to, because at this point I'd already kind of tried to put myself on that path of eudaimonia, and I was really trying to improve myself in every
mm,
way: health, money, and relationships. And I kind of realized at Penn State, it's where I went to college. It's a big party school. It's difficult it's difficult to improve your health because everyone around you is drinking or just eating terribly. College students, it's to be expected.
mm,
Money, people are in college to have a career, but until they graduate, I think no one's focus is actually, very few people's focus is actually on the money. They're just thinking, oh, I want to party. I want to go out this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There's a football game coming up. There's a St. Patrick's Day event. And even with relationships, party schools, you kind of I can't speak for all colleges, but party schools at least, there's more of a culture of short-term flings. The campus is big, so if you get someone mad at you, you can always just never see them again. So you don't really invest that much time into long-term, sustainable relationships. So for that, even when I lived there, my thought was I could stay here where it's a lot cheaper and I'm more familiar with this area, or I can leave and go somewhere else. And I
mm.
remember I left and I went to, that's how I moved to Virginia. I just moved to initially Leesburg, Northern Virginia. Cold. I knew two people here, but I didn't know anything about the area. I didn't know anything about, the county, how expensive it is, or anything like that. So, yeah, I think removing yourself from negative environments is always the best case scenario. Whatever you can do under your control is the best thing.
Okay, so this is now Tellers, and today we learned eudaimonia. I'm still struggling to practice it, but okay. We learned a new word, a new Greek word, eudaimonia. So, and our guest today has been learning. Now, if you are watching us, thank you for watching us. We appreciate comments, questions. Although we are coming to the end of the show, but also, if you get to see this after we are through with the show, you can always leave a comment or a question, and we'll keep checking and get back to you. And this is just about the end of the episode, and we appreciate you, Lenny, for coming to this show, otherwise known as Leviticus Rich. How does that? That's what I see in brackets. Leviticus Rich. Tell us about that. Why is it?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. It's long story short, when I was in college, I had a friend that he called me Lenovitis. He thought it'd be funny if I made my Facebook name Leviticus. I don't know why we thought that was funny. College stuff, I guess. I changed my name, and my dad couldn't pronounce Leviticus, so he would always call me Leviticus. And kind of to struggle pronouncing the name, he'd say, "Oh, Leviticus. That's an interesting Facebook name." And then I kind of liked Leviticus more than Leviticus. And then I started running with it. People started calling me Leviticus, so it just kind of stuck. That's that's really it. And then Rich, of course, is just short for Richardson.
Oh,
So
I thought he's the rich guy.
that's also the other part of it. It kind of worked out that way too. But yeah, so
Yeah, so we've come to the end of our show, and how would you like to connect with people? Yeah.
as far as where can they find me, or
Yeah.
yeah, I would say the best place. YouTube is a good place to find me. It's just YouTube at Leviticus Rich. Yes. Yep. And then Instagram, it's the same thing. My personal one is just Instagram at Leviticus Rich. And then I have one that I recently made that's purely for content.
Okay.
And that one's just Instagram at official Leviticus Rich.
Okay.
But yeah, that one's just content. The other one's more personal if you want to DM me or ask questions.
Yeah, so you follow up with the Lenny, that's Leviticus Rich. Yeah, YouTube at Leviticus Rich, Instagram at Leviticus Rich. You can always ask more questions and learn more Greek words because I know he has plenty. Being a student of Aristotle, Pluto, and all this, I know he has many Greek words. Yeah, so thank you very much, Lenny.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Yes, and we appreciate you sharing with us all that you have shared with us. But before we go, we would like you to leave us with a few words that we should always remember. What are they coming from Leviticus Rich?
Few words I think people should always remember. Try to make every single day. Here's another word. Here's another word I like. This one's not Greek. This one's Japanese. Try to Kaizen every day of your life. And Kaizen just means try to make 1% improvements every day. Consistently try to improve yourself.
Kaizen. So that introduces us to the next episode with Leviticus Rich, where we're going to learn some Chinese, Japanese, I don't know.
Some Japanese, yeah.
Wow, so this has been Now Tell Us. I've been your host, Anthony Morore, and together with Lenny, or rather Leviticus Rich, we are saying bye for now.
Take care. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.